Well, good evening, everybody. It's nice to be here. I want to thank Gene and Mark for extending an invitation to myself and to Councilman Castaneda to come here tonight and talk about a very important lawsuit that is now in preparation. I want to clarify that I'm not simply an attorney for Mr. Castaneda. I'm also an attorney for 9 other residents in the city of Salinas, most of whom live in the 1st District, which is Councilman Castaneda's district, but others of those 10 clients of mine live all over the city in different places in Salinas because their rights are also being affected by the subject matter of this lawsuit. So I know the media has been portraying this, the claim we filed against the city and the lawsuit that's coming as Mr. Castaneda's claim, but it's not. That claim has been filed on behalf of 10, and when we go to federal district court, which we anticipate doing within the next month, we're going to have close to 30 named plaintiffs, 30 residents from throughout the city of Salinas, claiming that their voting rights and their civil rights have been violated. So basically, what the lawsuit entails is that, a little history. On December of 2012, Councilman Castaneda was elected from District 1, which is predominantly a Hispanic district. As you know, district voting was implemented here, and that was a step forward. That was progress because the at-large voting tended to dilute the representation of historically victims of discrimination, such as the people who comprise the majority in District 1. So with councilmanic districts, they had for the first time a chance to elect a representative who would represent that community and not have the votes diluted by the majority in the city of Salinas. However, 1 week before Councilman Castaneda took office, the rules of the city council voted to change certain rules. And one of the most important rules changes was a modification as to how a councilman could put an item onto the agenda, onto the city council agenda. It used to be that any city councilman or woman could simply go to the city manager and say, listen, I need to put this matter onto the agenda. My constituents are concerned about it. And generally, the city manager, they have the discretion to put it on or not put it on, but they can't abuse that discretion. And generally, any city council member could put a matter onto the agenda that they felt was important, especially those matters that their constituents had brought to their attention. That changed 1 week before Jose Castaneda took office, and now, currently, in order to get an item onto the city council agenda, at least 2 council members have to support it, okay? That means that if someone comes to city councilman in the city of Salinas and say, I need something placed on the agenda. Just last week in the news, there was a report of lead paint exposure by one of the realtors realty companies exposed their tenants to lead paint. That's an important citywide issue. Someone could come to the councilman and say, hey, put this on the agenda. We think that this is a public safety issue. That council person cannot put it on the agenda. In fact, Councilman Castaneda tried to put that item onto the city council agenda. He could not get it onto the agenda for lack of a so-called buddy. So we feel that this system, this rules change was implemented specifically to frustrate the people in District 1 and have a state of affairs where they elect someone, they cast their vote, but then their vote is nullified because the person they elected to represent them is cut off from fully performing his representational duties. So that's the basic crux of our lawsuit. That's why we feel the Voting Rights Act has been violated. There's no sense voting if, in fact, the elected representative can't function. And we feel the history of Monterey. Now, we've had some discussions, people saying, well, what's wrong with that rule? It's no big thing. It might make sense to stop the agenda from being overcrowded with petty and frivolous items. But we have to look at it from history. This county was one of only 3 counties put under the jurisdiction of the Department of Justice because of historic exclusion of certain people from the vote. Only 3 counties outside of the Deep South. This gentleman's saying 4. Okay, we'll say 4. That's still, we're one of them. Monterey County is one of them. So we're going to federal district court now that the city has rejected our claim, and we feel that we'll get a very good reception in federal court because the federal courts are already aware of a certain history here in Monterey County of excluding. We feel this is just a backdoor way of bringing back at-large voting, if you think about it, because now the council person from District 1, his ability to represent has been diluted. It's diluted. It is now subject to the majority, okay? That's at-large voting. They brought back at-large voting through the back door. Let me just finish, and then I want to take some questions. You know, we also feel that other things have been done to the people in District 1 that have infringed on their civil rights. One of them is that we have Councilman Castaneda has tried repeatedly to get the matter of these officer-involved killings onto a city council agenda. He's tried to get the idea of a police and fire department civilian review board onto the agenda, and he has not been able to do that. So by standing up on these civil rights issues, and as you know, there are civil rights lawsuits going forward now on many of these incidents, by standing up in defense of the civil rights of others and being cut off in the manner I've described, we feel that that has hurt the civil rights of everyone, all 25,000 people who live in District 1, whether they voted for Jose or not, whether they are even citizens or not. He still has an obligation to represent everyone in that district. And again, it's not just Jose, because they may have targeted Jose, but they couldn't just say, well, we're going to enact this just for District 1. They couldn't do that, right? So that means everyone in the whole city of Salinas, in my view, has had an impediment thrown in front of them, because now you can't go to your council member and know that they'll put an item on the agenda. They have to get a buddy. And in many cases, there is, you know, they get buddies for the things that are important to them. Agribusiness, more, you know, the kind of things that we are concerned about that the little people might have some issues with. But try to get an agenda item on the water company, Alco, which is has threatened so many people with water shutoffs now during the drought. A water company which I don't understand why the city's even doing business with them. Once again, he could not get that onto the agenda, but that's an important issue. That's a human rights issue. So really, this lawsuit is not just about Jose, it's not just about District 1, it's about all of us. And I would urge all of us to carefully consider what's at stake here and put aside our differences and realize that the vote is important to everyone. You take away one section of the population, their right to vote, sooner or later we all are going to have our right to vote threatened. So with that, I've spoken too long, so I'll take some questions. I will. I will repeat the question. No, that's a good question. Simply because a member of the city council attempts to, say, get a measure passed, introduces a resolution, or attempts to put something on the agenda and they're not able to do it, or the city council majority says we're not going to consider that matter, that does not give rise to a civil rights suit. There's a difference between democracy. That's how democracy functions. If I go and make a presentation to city council and they don't want to take up my issue, say in the public participation section, I don't have a civil rights claim necessarily. That's just the way democracy works. But in this particular case, the timing is suspect. The law always looks at the timing. Why for years was it okay for every council person to have this ability? And only 1 week before Jose Castaneda came on board with his reputation for being a pretty outspoken person on some of these issues. Why was a change made then? Let me ask you something else too about the issue of putting things on the agenda. The city manager can put something on the agenda, the city attorney, and the city clerk. None of these people are elected officials. And there's not even a requirement that they live in Salinas. And yet, as individuals, they don't need a buddy. They can put any matter onto the agenda. Why is it that someone who's elected by the people can't do that. That's what we're trying to say.
In that case, then, when if they change it, are you saying they will never change?
Change that rule?
When is the time? When could they change it? Or are you saying they will never do it?
No, I think if they, you can, the city charter permits the city council to change rules, so long as those changes don't impede the public's ability to participate in city council business and meetings, okay? So they can make those changes, but they can't make any change they want to. So to answer your question, Mark, they could not legally make a change that violated the charter, which we think they did. But they could make an administrative change. They could make a rule for efficiency, and I could see where that might be a rule for efficiency, but a rule that looks facially neutral, that looks across the board not to cause a problem, can have a discriminatory effect, even if there is not a discriminatory intent. And that's what's happened in this case.
And then also, I think this is a very important question. A lot of us talk to council people and council all the time. And so if we happen to disagree with the council member, an action that's on the council that involves a council member, do we end up being named in a civil rights lawsuit like this because we contacted our council member and said, hey, we think, we have an opinion on this, and it turns out to be contrary to what that council member wanted.
Right. Well, you're not going to see me filing any lawsuit against a member of the public who voices their opinion to the city council. That's our democratic right to do that. And there's nothing wrong with, and we encourage that. That is not at all what's contemplated by the lawsuit. What Mark was asking was, could a private person be somehow a target of this lawsuit if they spoke to their city councilman and say, hey, I don't like what this other city council, I don't like what Castaneda is talking about, I want you to vote against it. Should they be fearful that they might be named in a civil rights lawsuit? No, that's democracy. That is public participation. I've done it myself my whole life. Talked to my elected representative and told my elected representative, hey, I heard they're going to vote on this. Don't vote for that thing. I don't like that proposal. You have every right to do that. This is different. The reason that the law provides for bringing a lawsuit against a private person is if they collaborate to violate someone's civil rights. That's what's happened here. It's not that we're suing or we're concerned about a negative comment or a conversation with your councilman. What we're concerned about is the official action of the government here in cutting off the ability of 25,000 people who elected Jose to get matters onto the agenda. Now, that's only one part of our lawsuit, but it's an important part. But no, that is not something that we contemplate at all.
Are you going to be able to provide any of the documentation? So, for instance, when you talk about the city charter and the method of what it is that you're talking about, how we went about it, can you provide that? And then also the minutes for when the vote took place?
Yes.
Change all, you know what I mean? Because I hear what you're saying, but I want to see something so I can reference it. And when I talk to my council person to say, you need to explain this because this is in writing, this is going on. So what is the defense?
Right. The question was, can we provide actual documents such as the city charter, such as the minutes of the December 11, 2012 meeting where this rules change was made, and then of course they made further changes just recently as this April? Yes, the answer to your question is yes. We are already reviewing and systematically requesting documents. Most of these are public record, but we're going to make it easy for people to find out what this lawsuit is. We're going to bring all these things together. We're working on a comprehensive packet of what were the rules, how were they changed, what was the decision. I'll tell you that the meeting on December 11th, 2012, where they made this rules change, there was another item on the agenda just before it, which was a significant issue, a substantive issue before the council. But Councilman Sergio Sanchez, who is Mr. Castaneda's predecessor, said, wait a minute, we're going to get a new mayor and a new member of the city council at the next meeting. Shouldn't we put this off? Shouldn't we put this matter off until these new members come on board? And they put that one item off. The city council said, you're right, we should hold off. Then item 2 came up, this rules change. And so Sergio Sanchez said again, wait a minute, we just tabled one item to wait for the new city council. Why are we considering this rules change? And he was told, and I believe it's in the minutes, we're now in the process of getting the video and making a transcript of that video. He was told, well, we've already talked to the incoming mayor, Mr. Gunter. We've already talked to him, and he's fine with it. So then Mr. Sanchez said, well, have you talked to the incoming First District Councilman, Mr. Castaneda? And he didn't get an answer to that. So you see what I'm saying? We are concerned about stuff like that.
As a member of the public, I need for it to be easy for me to get to it. Because I mean, you guys dealing with other stuff with our school board, and I want to hear the documents. So we can just make it easy. Don't just hand it to Steve Carter and tell me where to go. You know what I mean?
No, we're setting up a website. We call it Justice for Salinas. We're going to be posting the documents. I have a copy of the claim that we filed. The city voted on September 15th, just a few days ago, to reject our claim. That means we proceed in federal court. We'll put the claim on the website. When we file the lawsuit, we'll put that on the website as we get documentation. We want to educate the people. We want to educate the public. I'm letting you call on people, Mark. That's right. Well, it's discriminatory because even though it's applied equally, that rule is in effect for all districts. The buddy system is in effect for all districts. It has a discriminatory impact, even though it's facially neutral in District 1, because District 1 is comprised of members of what we call a protected class. They're historically victims of discrimination. So this has a particularly and disparate discriminatory impact on them because their issues have been traditionally, historically excluded. They battled for years just to even get a council member that would represent that community. So you're right. On its face, it's not discriminatory, but in actual practice, it is. The other thing about it is that whereas I don't think it's the impact on I believe that all citizens, all residents in the city of Salinas have been negatively impacted by it. I do think it's had a negative impact on everyone. They couldn't exactly say, well, we want to change the rules so that this man cannot come in here and bring these issues up from just, they couldn't say that. They obviously could not say that, so they passed an across-the-board rule.
How can you say that? Why they did it?
I'm sorry?
How can you say that's the reason why they did it?
Well, I think that, number one, the timing is highly suspect. As I said before, it was perfectly acceptable for years to have agenda items. Only when this particular councilman was elected did they make that rules change. And the other reason I believe that it has had a discriminatory motive. You're asking me why are we saying that it had a discriminatory? It had an effect. There's no question that it had the effect, even if it was, across the board. But we also say the motive was discriminatory, and we have evidence that in fact there was a concerted effort specifically to block Jose Castaneda's ability to represent his constituents. I'm not at liberty at this time to disclose exactly what that evidence is, but we will be putting that evidence forward in our federal district claim.
Along with you said they're trying to back out against the voter at large or something like that. Do you know what the negative is of 75% Hispanic? So I don't know how that would make the voters at large an advantage to vote against what you say is the protected Hispanic class. No, but he referred to the reason why that system is because of
Right.
that. But we got 75% Hispanic, so that should prove that there's not I call it non-Hispanic voting against Hispanics.
I think that these are all very good questions. I think that the answer is that historically, of course, the Salinas of today. Well, you can't understand what's happening going forward unless you understand what happened in the past. That's clear. But I'll talk about the present and talk about the future. The city of Salinas may be primarily Hispanic, 70%, 75%. The composition of the city council does not reflect that demographic. It does not. And even if it did, we would still have a legitimate claim here because, for example, if I live in a community, let's take, for example, the African American community, and I live in a community that's 100% or 90% African American, and I'm an African American, and have an incident with the police, and my allegation is that I've been subject to some form of abuse. And they say, well, 90% of the people who live here are also African American, and they're not subject to these abuses. You don't see them complaining. That doesn't mean that that one individual does not have a legitimate civil rights claim. They do. And so what we're saying is that even if the city of Salinas is majority Hispanic, the people in District 1 have a right. They have their civil rights. They have the right to be represented by their chosen elected official. That's right. And that's why I'm trying to make the point over and over that when they came after Jose, they also took away your rights. They took away everybody's rights. Yeah.
Where you can really see the extreme is your city managers and your city clerks that don't live in the community, that bring in these mail order laws that goes to closed conventions, that is able to matriculate their laws right onto the city council's agenda, whereas representative locally elected officials cannot.
I think that's a valid point. I think gentleman's talking about the fact that here people who are not even elected bring in these elements from outside the community to take advantage. I think that's, from what I can see, and I'll close with this, I see a real power grab by this present city council. I'm speaking from my own personal opinion, what I've observed. There's a very dangerous concentration of authority in what we now have on this city council. I think there's a disregard of the issues that the people have, not just in District 1, but everywhere. There's a disregard of those issues. And I think there's too much influence by people who don't have the interests of the majority of the community at heart. And I've been to every city council meeting for the last 3 months. And I've formed that impression just in the last 3 months. But I think we've taken more time than we needed to. Jose wants to say a couple words.
Sure, I'll make it quick. Once again, it comes down to the equal representation and the power and authority that an elected official has, especially with district elections. And it also goes to one of the questions here. 75% we can give and take on those numbers, majority of 155,000 people in this city, Hispanic. And the reason why we have district elections as well. Even when you win an election like I have, when I face two opponents from the machine, keep in mind I did not raise money, I did not do a campaign whatsoever, it was not even a grassroots effort, but I won solidly against these two other candidates. So even when that was done in the November election, the conspiring began right after that. So yes, we may have 70 or 75% of a certain race in this city, which would elect folks like myself to the respective communities. But even after you get over that hurdle, then you run into these rules that are enacted 1 week before I took my oath of office. This happened December 11th of 2012. I took an oath of office December 18th, 2012. Now, let's compare apples to apples. In this very same county, which, by the way, there was 4 counties out of 58 counties in the state of California that fell under the Department of Justice federal level. Now there's 3. 1 fell off. I can't recall if it's Kern County, but they voted and they got one of the counties out. Now, there's a city, there's King City, 13,000 people, 90% Latino, Hispanic, at-large elections. look at their makeup and see if this is true today, 2015, and it is not. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gene and Mark. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming. We have a lot more questions than I thought.